In the dim corridors of Britain's underworld, a chilling truth unfolds. Some children don't inherit bedtime stories or hand-me-down toys. They inherit codes of silence, encrypted secrets, and an unwritten oath of loyalty. Born into crime before they could spell the word, these sons were groomed not just by their father's choices but by an entire legacy of organized transgression. By the time most kids learn how to tie their shoelaces, these heirs already know how to wipe a phone, recognize a tail, and never ask questions. They aren't just exposed to crime, they're conditioned by it. According to the Center for Crime and Justice Studies, children raised in criminal households are 3 times more likely to come into contact with the justice system before the age of 18. But this isn't a story of troubled youth spiraling into chaos. It's about how these children, decades later, have become the masterminds of a new empire, silent, digital, and devastatingly efficient. Gone are the days when criminal power was measured by street muscle or fear-mongering headlines. In the shadows of a hyper-connected world, today's crime bosses no longer need brass knuckles. They use blockchain. The evolution is surgical. Brute force has been traded for strategy, and blood-stained alleys for encrypted networks. A recent Europol report revealed a staggering 62% rise in the use of encrypted communication and cryptocurrency among criminal groups since 2020. These aren't your traditional mobsters, they're digital tacticians. They invest in front companies, pass audits with flying colors, and flash degrees from respected universities. They pose for polished LinkedIn profiles while funneling illicit funds through crypto wallets and shell corporations. The Financial Conduct Authority reports a 400% spike in suspicious crypto transactions linked to high-risk zones like London and Liverpool in the past 3 years. Visibility, for them, is vulnerability, and so they vanish into legitimate-looking lives while orchestrating crime with the swipe of a finger. To understand how deep the roots of this transformation go, one must revisit the infamous crime dynasties that once gripped the UK with terror and precision. In the not-so-distant past, names like Adams, Kinahan, and Arif sparked fear, not curiosity. These syndicates ran drug empires, controlled extortion rings, and executed contract killings with clockwork discipline. The Adams family, known as the Clerkenwell Crime Syndicate, were so efficient they were often described by law enforcement as one of Britain's most professional criminal outfits. The Kinahans expanded their reach beyond Irish borders into Europe and the Middle East. And the Arifs were notorious for running South London like a militarized zone. Their patriarchs are now either buried, imprisoned, or vanished into exile. But what many assumed to be the end of an era was, in fact, a calculated rebirth. The National Crime Agency reported in 2023 that UK crime group structures have not shrunk. They've flattened, adopted tech, and expanded into global logistics with chilling precision. While the old guard made their fortunes through force and notoriety, their successors are schooled in invisibility. These new players were raised behind gates, sent to elite academies, and taught to smile for cameras while shielding entire empires in offshore accounts. But don't let the cufflinks and clean records fool you. The code remains unchanged: loyalty, silence, profit. They've mastered the art of concealment. Encrypted messaging apps, digital money trails, and shell companies are their tools of the trade. Where their fathers left bodies and bullet holes, they leave no trace, just numbers that vanish across borders. Among these modern heirs, one name looms larger than most: Daniel Kinahan. Son of Christy Kinahan, once dubbed the Dapper Don, Daniel is the embodiment of the 21st century gangster. With tailored suits, high-profile boxing connections, and a public image built to charm, Daniel operates not from a hideout, but from Dubai, beyond the reach of Western extradition. Despite US and EU sanctions and a $5 million bounty on his head, he remains untouchable. His influence seeps into professional boxing. In 2020, he was credited with brokering what would have been one of the biggest fights in history: Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua. But the ring was only a stage. Behind the scenes, investigations by the BBC and Irish authorities link Daniel to a criminal network that spans over 20 countries and generates more than £1 billion in revenue. Narcotics, arms trafficking, money laundering, It's all there, concealed beneath layers of crypto investments and fake boardrooms. He doesn't dodge the law. He outruns it. But Daniel isn't alone. Another rising figure in the digital criminal hierarchy is Lee Byrne, son of Liam Byrne, a trusted Kinahan associate. Lee isn't the ghost in the machine, he's the illusion. With a perfectly curated Instagram feed, designer fashion, and a headline-making relationship with Lily Gerard, daughter of football legend Steven Gerrard, Lee wears legitimacy like cologne. To the outside world, he's a celebrity in the making. But authorities believe the glamour masks something darker. Irish investigators suspect Lee of deep involvement in drug logistics, utilizing encrypted systems and high-end technology to coordinate trafficking routes that stretch across borders. A 2023 Interpol report found that 70% of criminal crypto wallets had direct links to UK or Irish crime groups, with Kinahan affiliates like Lee near the top of the list. And then there's the shadowy continuation of the Adams family legacy. Once synonymous with organized brutality in North London, the Adams brothers, Terry, Tommy, and Patrick, ran an operation so polished it rivaled corporate boardrooms. Arms dealing, extortion, financial manipulation, they perfected the business of crime. Terry served time for money laundering, Tommy was the enforcer, and Patrick handled the books. The early 2000s saw a wave of convictions, asset seizures, and the gradual unraveling of their visible empire. But in 2025, the next generation of Adams' influence doesn't carry guns. They carry investment portfolios. They're rarely named publicly but frequently surface in business registers and property deals. King's College London researchers suggest these successors operate through shell companies registered offshore and have sunk millions into real estate in London and Spain. Their operations appear legitimate. Exclusive nightclub security, luxury car rentals, art galleries. Yet, scratch the surface and you'll find the same engines, only better hidden. According to the National Crime Agency, remnants of the Adams clan continue to launder millions through cryptocurrency and overseas trusts, staying just beyond the reach of modern justice. In the 1990s, Curtis "Cocky" Warren stood as one of Britain's most feared names, an underworld giant whose criminal web stretched from Colombia's coca fields to West African ports. With a reported fortune of over £200 million, he earned his title as Interpol's most wanted, moving massive quantities of cocaine and heroin through British shipping channels under the noses of customs officials. But prison walls couldn't erase his legacy. Released in the early 2020s, Warren faded from tabloid headlines, but not from the streets. His ghost lives on through Ments, family associates, and a new generation that inherited more than memories. They inherited a blueprint. In Liverpool, the criminal scene hasn't softened, it's adapted. The National Crime Agency's 2024 report reveals that new Merseyside-based gangs have embraced encrypted communication and international logistics like seasoned tech entrepreneurs. These successors don't operate in back alleys or nightclubs. They run logistics firms and ghost companies, trading flash for finesse. Crypto wallets move money faster than a getaway car ever could. In just the past 3 years, HMRC has seized over £90 million in laundered funds tied to shell firms rooted in Liverpool. What was once controlled by intimidation is now governed by spreadsheets and encrypted servers. The kingpins may have changed, but the empire endures. Further south, in the maze-like boroughs of South London, the Arif name still echoes through whispers. Once a dominant force in the 1990s, infamous for their brutal enforcement and military discipline, the original Arif crew has splintered. Many of the elder members are either incarcerated or deported to Turkey, but the bloodlines remain, pumping influence into a new breed of decentralized microcrews. These aren't gangs in the traditional sense. They're agile, corporate in structure, and subtle in operation. Their leaders wear tailored jackets, not tracksuits, and run music festivals, real estate flips, and security firms. But beneath the legitimate gloss, the criminal machinery ticks on. National Crime Agency investigations have flagged numerous property deals in Lambeth and Southwark, transactions linked to shell companies controlled by Arif family affiliates. Behind the paperwork lie drugs, weapons, and decades of invisible control. Travel north to Birmingham, and the transformation becomes even more surgical. The Noonan and Brindle families once ruled with fists and fear, their names enough to command silence in the streets. Today, their successors sit at conference tables, not bar stools. These new age criminals have traded backroom brawls for boardroom strategies. Offshore trusts, tax havens, and digital currencies have become their instruments of power. And they're not just investing in property or fake companies, they're cultivating cultural capital. Music labels rooted in grime and drill have emerged as financial vehicles and recruitment tools. In 2024, a joint task force linked over £8 million in illicit funds to Birmingham-based labels, revealing how deep the overlap runs between criminality and music culture. The streets may seem quieter, but the soundtrack of organized crime plays on, only now it's auto-tuned and monetized. At the center of this transformation lies a universal constant: technology. Cryptocurrency has become the bloodstream of organized crime, pumping illicit funds across continents in seconds. According to Chainalysis, over £10 billion in illegal crypto transactions were traced in Europe in 2024 alone. This isn't happening in dark corners. It's happening on decentralized exchanges, masked behind e-commerce storefronts and polished user interfaces. Criminals use Monero for its untraceable architecture, rely on mixing services to scrub transactions clean, and cycle money through peer-to-peer platforms like seasoned bankers. Apps like Signal and Telegram have replaced safe houses, offering encrypted communication that vanishes before it can ever be traced. Power isn't held in muscle anymore, it's held in passwords. And just as the methods have changed, so has the recruitment. The new generation of gangsters isn't built in alleyways, they're molded on social media. Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube have become recruitment grounds where designer lifestyles and curated content blur the line between fantasy and criminal reality. Jets, Lamborghinis, stacks of cash, these aren't props, they're bait. The University of Kent warns that the gangster myth has become dangerously aspirational, especially among youth. It's no longer about intimidation, it's about influence. According to the National Crime Agency, online gang-related content rose by 81% since 2020, with more than 3,000 flagged videos believed to promote criminal lifestyles. Many of these content creators are second-generation crime figures themselves, turning their real-world reach into digital dominance. But the rise of this invisible empire hasn't gone unnoticed. Law enforcement is evolving too, though never quite fast enough. Operation Venetic, launched in 2021, offered a rare glimpse behind the curtain when authorities cracked EncroChat, uncovering over 10,000 encrypted messages. Massive arrests followed across Europe. Yet that breakthrough is already ancient history. Criminals have moved on to more secure platforms like Sky ECC clones, VPN overlays, and customized encryption networks. Europol now reports a 45% increase in cyber-facilitated trafficking since 2022, with law enforcement always a step behind. And while gunfire may have grown rare, the violence hasn't vanished. It's simply become more precise. London saw a 14% rise in knife crimes in gang-afflicted boroughs in 2024. In Greater Manchester, disappearances tied to criminal operations remain unsolved, their stories silenced long before headlines could be written. This isn't the end of crime, it's its reinvention. The sons of gangsters aren't chasing turf with fists and guns, they're running empires with encrypted apps and offshore accounts. They whisper through fiber optic cables, move product through anonymized servers, and quietly control wealth most can't trace. The Home Office warns of generational crime as Britain's greatest domestic threat, and it's already here. What was once written in blood is now embedded in code. These heirs are invisible CEOs in a digital underworld where influence is currency, visibility is death, and power has never been more difficult to detect or more dangerous. From the alleyways of South London to encrypted networks spanning the globe, organized crime has shed its skin but not its soul. Today's crime lords operate in silence, cloaked in wealth, technology, and legitimacy, while the underworld thrives just beneath the surface of everyday life. If you think the mafia died with the old dons, think again. The empire lives on, hidden in plain sight. If you're fascinated by how yesterday's gangsters became today's ghost kings, Subscribe to Inside the Secret World of Mafia Titans, where we expose the evolution of organized crime like you've never seen before. Who's really pulling the strings in your city? The answers might just surprise you.
Picture this. A sun-kissed reality TV star steps off a plane from Dubai. Designer bags in hand, million-dollar watch glinting on her wrist. She's living the dream that millions chase: fame, luxury, endless possibilities. But hidden beneath those perfectly curated Instagram posts and glamorous lifestyle lies a secret so dark, so twisted, that it would make international headlines and destroy everything she'd built. This is the story of Magdalena Sadlo, a woman who traded the Love Island villa for something far more dangerous, sand far more lucrative. A woman who became the financial mastermind behind a £53 million drug empire that stretched from the glittering towers of Dubai to the grimy streets of Manchester. But how does a reality TV star become the architect of an international criminal conspiracy? How does someone with everything to lose risk it all for something so deadly? And what happens when the walls finally close in? Stay with me, because this story will take you on a journey through deception, greed, and the ultimate price of ambition. This is the chilling tale of how paradise became prison. Let's rewind to a time when Magdalena Sadlo's biggest concern was which bikini to wear on national television. The year was different, the world was watching, and she was living every young woman's dream, basking in the Spanish sun on Love Island, surrounded by cameras, attention, and the intoxicating taste of fame. But even then, there were whispers. Fans noticed something different about Magdalena. While other contestants worried about finding love or surviving the next elimination, she seemed calculating. Her Instagram captions weren't just inspirational, they were prophetic. "Success looks good on me," she'd write, accompanied by photos that screamed luxury and mystery. "Some people hustle for a weekend. I hustle for a legacy." At the time, followers thought it was just another influencer speaking in motivational quotes. They had no idea they were reading the manifesto of someone who would soon orchestrate one of the most sophisticated drug trafficking operations in recent British history. The transition from reality TV to real crime didn't happen overnight. It was gradual, methodical, and brilliantly disguised as the lifestyle of a successful social media personality. Because who would suspect that those frequent trips to Dubai posted about, actually, something far more sinister? Dubai, the city of gold, where millionaires are made and questions aren't asked. For Magdalena, it became more than just a vacation destination. It became her second home, her sanctuary, and ultimately, her gateway into a world that existed in the shadows of legitimate business. The trip started innocently enough. Social media showed her shopping in the world's most exclusive boutiques, dining at restaurants where a single meal cost more than most people's monthly salary, and networking with individuals whose wealth seemed to have no visible source. But intelligence agencies were watching. They noticed patterns that the public couldn't see. Magdalena wasn't just vacationing, she was learning. Each trip to Dubai was a masterclass in money laundering, drug trafficking, logistics, and international criminal finance. What authorities would later discover was that Magdalena had been recruited by a sophisticated Middle Eastern syndicate that specialized in flooding European markets with high-purity cocaine, cannabis, and ketamine. But they didn't want just another mule or street-level dealer. They wanted someone with intelligence, connections, and most importantly, someone who could hide in plain sight. They wanted someone exactly like Magdalena. Her public persona was perfect cover. A reality TV star with a legitimate reason to travel internationally, to spend large amounts of money, and to maintain an expensive lifestyle. Who would suspect that behind those designer sunglasses and champagne toasts, she was memorizing drug prices, studying supply chain logistics, and learning how to move millions of pounds without triggering financial investigations? This is where the story takes a truly chilling turn, because Magdalena wasn't content to be just a well-paid participant in someone else's criminal enterprise. She had bigger ambitions. She wanted to run the show. And that's exactly what she did. Court documents would later reveal that Magdalena had transformed herself into what prosecutors called the business brain of the entire operation. She wasn't just taking orders, she was giving them. She wasn't just moving drugs, she was revolutionizing how the entire network operated. Think about this for a moment. While most criminal organizations operate in chaos, with poor record-keeping and constant paranoia, Magdalena brought corporate precision to international drug trafficking. She maintained spreadsheets that would make Fortune 500 companies jealous. Profit margins calculated to the penny on cocaine kilos. Ketamine wholesale prices compared against street values across different UK cities. Stock levels tracked across multiple distribution points. Logistics routes mapped and optimized to minimize law enforcement detection. This wasn't your typical criminal operation. This was business school methodology applied to billion-dollar narcotics trafficking. But perhaps most disturbing was how she compartmentalized her double life. During the day, she might be posting Instagram stories about her morning yoga routine or her latest fashion haul. By evening, she could be coordinating the movement of 30 kilograms of cocaine through Manchester's underground networks. The psychological profile that emerges is of someone who didn't just stumble into crime, someone who embraced it, refined it, and ultimately perfected it. Running a drug empire from spreadsheets is one thing, but Magdalena's operation required something more dangerous: physical involvement in trafficking operations that could result in decades in prison if caught. This is where her story becomes truly terrifying, because Magdalena didn't just coordinate from a distance. She got her hands dirty. Intelligence agencies discovered that she had masterminded what they called whistle-stop tours, high-speed drug trafficking runs, using luxury BMWs that could move hundreds of kilograms of narcotics across England in a single trip. These weren't amateur operations. They were military-precise logistics exercises that required split-second timing, perfect coordination, and nerves of steel. Picture this scene: a quiet residential cul-de-sac in Manchester. Families are having dinner, children are playing in gardens, and life is proceeding normally. Then a sleek BMW pulls up, and out steps Magdalena Sadlo, looking like she belongs in a fashion magazine rather than a drug deal. She's carrying what appears to be a gym bag, but that bag doesn't contain workout clothes or protein shakes. It contains 33 kilograms of pure cocaine, worth millions of pounds on the street. Surveillance footage captured these moments: Magdalena moving with confidence, professionalism, and a calmness that suggested this was just another day at the office. She had overseen at least 7 major trafficking runs, moving nearly 300 kilograms of cocaine in total. Each operation was planned with the precision of a military campaign. Rental cars to avoid tracking, safe houses positioned at strategic intervals, burner phones replaced after every operation. Routes changed constantly to avoid establishing patterns that law enforcement could detect. But every criminal, no matter how careful, eventually makes a mistake. And Magdalena's mistake was thinking she was untouchable. While Magdalena was building her empire, law enforcement was building a case. Operation Matrix, the code name for the investigation that would bring down her entire network, had been running for months, involving multiple agencies across several countries. They were tracking everything: financial transactions, flight patterns, communication intercepts, and physical surveillance that painted a picture of criminal activity on an unprecedented scale. The breakthrough came in February 2024. Border agents at Manchester Airport flagged a routine return flight from Dubai. The passenger manifest showed Magdalena Sadlo, reality TV personality, returning from what appeared to be another luxury vacation. But this time, they were ready. When Magdalena stepped off that plane, she was carrying nearly £200,000 worth of undeclared luxury goods: a £130,000 Patek Philippe rose gold watch, a £30,000 Rolex, designer clothing worth tens of thousands more. Her luggage told a different story than her Instagram posts. Hidden among the designer clothes were receipts that couldn't be explained, burner phones that connected to encrypted networks, and cash that had no legitimate source. The arrest was swift and decisive. The woman who had spent years evading detection was finally caught, not by sophisticated surveillance or undercover operations, but by basic customs enforcement. But the arrest was just the beginning, because now authorities had access to everything: her phones, her records, her contacts, and most damaging of all, her detailed documentation of years of criminal activity. What happened next reads like a thriller novel, except it's all true. Magdalena's arrest sent shockwaves through both legitimate and criminal circles. How could someone so high-profile, so visible, be so deeply embedded in international drug trafficking? The answer, as investigators discovered, was both simple and terrifying. She wasn't a victim of circumstances. She was the architect of her own criminal empire. The evidence was overwhelming. Investigators presented spreadsheets. She had maintained some in code, some boldly explicit. Audio recordings revealed her giving detailed instructions to subordinates on money laundering techniques, drug pricing strategies, and how to convert street-level sales into tax-free Dubai luxury purchases. She had helped move tens of millions of pounds worth of drugs through the UK, but perhaps more damaging than any single transaction was her institutional knowledge. She understood the entire ecosystem, how to move money quietly, how to convert criminal proceeds into legitimate assets, how to maintain operations even when individual components were compromised. The court proceedings revealed the true scope of her operation. Over £53 million worth of trafficking, coordination with overseas crime bosses, leadership in laundering criminal profits across multiple jurisdictions. When the judge delivered his verdict, his words carried the weight of moral authority. This was not a lapse in judgment. It was a sustained campaign of criminal activity motivated by greed. You helped mastermind a drug empire and must now face the consequences. 14 years in prison. The gavel came down, and Magdalena Sadlow's transformation was complete. From reality TV star to convicted criminal mastermind, she didn't cry, she didn't plead, she simply nodded. Perhaps understanding that this was the inevitable conclusion of choices made years earlier. But Magdalena's story doesn't end with her sentencing, because her arrest was just the beginning of a much larger collapse. Operation Matrix didn't just target one individual, it dismantled an entire network. 13 people connected to the trafficking web were arrested and convicted. Their combined prison sentences totaled more than 140 years. A generation of criminals removed from the streets. With Magdalena gone, investigators could dismantle additional layers of the operation. Assets were seized. Front companies were dissolved. International accounts were frozen. The criminal empire that had seemed so sophisticated and untouchable crumbled within months. Dubai, once considered an untouchable sanctuary for international criminals, suddenly found itself under intense scrutiny. Magdalena's conviction proved a chilling truth. Even the most beautiful facades can hide monstrous machines beneath. As we reflect on this story, the most disturbing aspect isn't the drugs or the money or even the sophisticated criminal operations. It's the transformation of a human being. Magdalena Sadlow had everything that millions of people dream of: fame, attention, opportunities that most could never imagine. She could have leveraged her reality TV success into legitimate business ventures, endorsement deals, or media careers. Instead, she chose a different path. She chose power over popularity, risk over security, and wealth at any cost over wealth through legitimate means. Her Instagram captions, once seen as motivational quotes, now read like coded confessions. Success looks good on me. But at what cost? Some people hustle for a weekend, hustle for a legacy of crime and incarceration. Her story serves as a haunting reminder that in the age of social media and instant fame, image means nothing if the foundation is built on corruption. Magdalena had fame, attention, and opportunity, but chose to weaponize these advantages in service of criminal ambition. Today, she sits in a prison cell, stripped of the luxury lifestyle that once defined her public persona. The designer clothes have been replaced by prison uniforms. The champagne toasts have been replaced by institutional meals. The adoring fans have been replaced by the cold reality of criminal justice. Her name will be remembered not for love, laughter, or the fleeting fame of reality television, but for betrayal, deception, and ambition twisted into darkness. She went from Love Island to criminal empire, from the glow of reality TV cameras to the gray walls of a prison cell, from paradise to prison. Her story serves as a warning that even those who shine the brightest can cast the darkest shadows, that the pursuit of easy money and criminal power ultimately leads to the destruction of everything that matters. And in the end, she lost everything. But here's the terrifying truth. Magdalena Sadlow's story is just the tip of the iceberg right now. In penthouses and private jets around the world, there are others living double lives. Socialites who are money launderers, influencers who are drug kingpins, celebrities who are criminal masterminds. The secret world of modern organized crime is more sophisticated, more glamorous, and more dangerous than ever before. What other reality TV stars are hiding billion-dollar criminal empires? Which Instagram influencers are actually running international trafficking operations? And how many more Magdalena Sadlows are out there, hiding in plain sight behind designer sunglasses and champagne toasts? Welcome to Inside the Secret World of Mafia Titans, where we expose the hidden criminal empires of the rich and famous, where we reveal how modern organized crime operates in the shadows of legitimate celebrity culture, where we show you the shocking truth about who really controls the world's most dangerous criminal networks. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because next week, we're diving deep into the story of a Hollywood Alistair who secretly ran a money laundering operation worth over $200 million. You'll recognize the name. You'll be shocked by the truth. Drop a comment below. Do you think there are more celebrity criminals hiding in plain sight? What other reality TV stars do you think might be living double lives? New episodes every Tuesday, uncovering the titans who rule from the shadows. Because in the secret world of mafia titans, the most dangerous criminals aren't the ones you'd expect. They're the ones you'd never suspect.
London, 1965. The city was reborn. The war was over, the smoke had cleared, and a new era was pulsing through its veins. The Beatles were on the radio. Carnaby Street was the heart of cool. Neon lights flickered over Soho's late-night clubs, where jazz played, champagne flowed, and the future felt bright. But if you knew where to look, if you slipped past the velvet ropes and into the back rooms of pubs like Mr. Smith's in Catford or the Blind Beggar in Whitechapel, you'd find a different London. A darker one. A city where power wasn't won with votes or money, but with silence, with fear, with a single bullet in the dark. This was the real underworld of 1960s London. Not the swinging 60s. The under 60s. A world where loyalty was currency and betrayal was paid in blood. Where publicans handed over their weekly pensions to avoid broken windows, or worse. Where gaming machines lined the walls like golden altars, feeding the coffers of men who ruled from the shadows. And at the center of it all were two families, the Cray twins from the East End and the Richardson brothers from South London. Their names were whispered in fear, their empires built on violence, and their feud would become the most brutal gang war in British history. It began not with a grand declaration, but with a sneer. A single word, spat across a crowded room. Fat poof. That's what George Cornell allegedly said to Ronnie Cray at the Astor Club Christmas party in December 1965. Drunk, reckless, riding high on his new alliance, Cornell didn't just insult Ronnie, he lit a fuse. Because Ronnie Cray wasn't just a gangster. He was a twin. A man whose mind danced on the edge of obsession, whose rage was as deep as the Thames. And that insult? It wasn't just an insult. It was a death sentence. And across the river, in South London, the Richardsons smiled. Because Cornell was theirs now. He had defected, and that made him a weapon. But to understand how a single word could ignite a war, you have to go back. Back to the cold cells of Shepton Mallet Prison, where the seeds of this blood feud were first sown. It was there, behind iron bars, that Ronnie Cray, George Cornell, and Charlie Richardson first crossed paths. Three men from different worlds, bound by crime, all nursing grudges. Ronnie, the volatile twin with a short fuse. Cornell, the unpredictable drug dealer with a taste for chaos. And Charlie Richardson, the cold, calculating mind who saw violence not as a last resort, but as a business strategy. Charlie and his younger brother Eddie weren't born into power. They were forged in it. Camberwell, South London, was their battleground. Their father had vanished, leaving their mother Eileen to raise them in a world where survival meant toughness. Charlie, born in 1934, was the thinker, the one who planned, who schemed, who understood that fear was the most valuable currency. Eddie, born 2 years later, was the muscle, fierce, loyal, and always ready to throw a punch. Together, they built an empire on extortion, gambling rackets, and a level of brutality so extreme, they earned a nickname that still sends chills down the spine, the Torture Gang. They didn't just beat people. They broke them. Men who stole from them were nailed to warehouse floors with 6-inch nails near Tower Bridge. One collector, caught pocketing protection money, spent 2 days hanging there, bleeding, humiliated, while gang members like driver Harry Beard took turns mocking him. It was a message, a warning, and it worked. Publicans across South London paid their pensions without question. Gaming machines, those golden cash cows, poured money into the Richardson coffers. And when the law came knocking, the Richardsons had a solution: corruption. Commander Ken Drury of the Flying Squad took his cut. So did others. Even pornographer Jimmy Humpher sent postcards to the cops with the words, "Wish you were here," A sick joke that masked a very real web of bribes and backroom deals. And then there was Mad Frankie Fraser. If Charlie was the brain and Eddie the fist, Frankie was the nightmare. A man who'd been in and out of prison since he was a teenager, who deserted the army during World War II, and who'd spent over 40 years behind bars by the time he died. His weapon of choice? Pliers. He'd yank out teeth for fun, grinning as the blood dripped. He earned his nickname during a brawl at a club called Mr. Smith's, where someone shouted, "You're mad, Frank." And the name stuck. In the underworld, Frankie Fraser wasn't just feared. He was legendary. And he answered to one family, the Richardsons. But the East End had legends of its own. Reggie and Ronnie Cray, identical twins, born in 1933, mirror images with opposite souls. Reggie was the smooth operator, the nightclub owner who smiled at celebrities and politicians, who moved through high society like a king. Ronnie was the storm, unstable, unpredictable, and always one step from violence. Together, they ran an empire built on charm, fear, and a network of clubs, rackets, and loyal soldiers like Richard Hart. They were tabloid stars, their names splashed across the papers not just for crimes, but for their connections to boxers, musicians, and movie stars. They weren't just gangsters. They were celebrities. And that made them dangerous. For years, the Crays and the Richardsons coexisted in a tense, uneasy peace. They clashed over protection money, over control of gaming machines, over territory. But it was never all-out war. Not yet. The balance held, until George Cornell switched sides. Cornell had been with the East End crews, part of the Watney Streeters, an ally of the Crays. But in 1964, he jumped ship. He took his drug trade, Purple Hearts, Dexedrine, cannabis, with him and aligned himself with the Richardsons. And worse, he did it with a smirk. He mocked the Crays. He flaunted his new power. And when he called Ronnie a fat poof at that Christmas party, it wasn't just an insult. It was a declaration of war. The fuse was lit. And it only took one spark to blow it all up. That spark came on the night of March 7, 1966, at Mr. Smith's Club in Catford, a high-stakes gaming den owned by Manchester businessmen Doug G. Flood and Bill Benny. The club was a prize, a cash machine run by whoever controlled it. Flood and Benny had made a deal with the Richardsons. Eddie and Frankie would protect the club in exchange for a cut. But that deal drew eyes. Rival gangs. And East End men. That night, the club was packed. Smoke hung in the air. The hum of slot machines mixed with laughter and low conversation. Eddie Richardson, stocky and intense, drank with Frankie Fraser, whose dark humor and pliers in his pocket presence kept everyone on edge. Around them were members of Billy Haywood's South London gang, including Peter Hennessy, a loudmouth, a fighter, and a man who didn't believe in backing down. And there, in the corner, was Richard Hart, Ronnie Cray's man. A quiet reminder that the East End had reached. For a while, it was peaceful. Men drank. They joked. One guest later said they were chatting quite happily. But peace in the underworld is always temporary. Around midnight, Eddie stood up and told Hennessy and his crew to leave. It was his club, his rules. Hennessy didn't move. Instead, he leaned in and spat the words, "You're a half-baked citizen. I could take you any expletive time you like." The room froze, then exploded. Fists flew. Tables shattered. Glass rained down as men swung at each other in a frenzy. In the chaos, a gun cracked. Then another. And Richard Hart, Ronnie Cray's loyal soldier, fell to the floor, a bullet in his chest. Just like that. Was it meant for him? Or was it a stray round in the madness? No one knew. But the message was clear. The Crays had been attacked. And then it got worse. Billy Gardner, one of Haywood's men, pulled a .38 and shot Frankie Fraser in the thigh. Frankie went down, howling. Hennessy took a bayonet to the scalp, blood pouring down his face. By the time the club emptied, it looked like a war zone. One witness called it, like Dodge City. Eddie and Frankie ended up in Lewisham Hospital, refusing to talk to police. But the damage was done. Hart was dead. And Ronnie Cray was coming. The next day, March 8, 1966, George Cornell walked into the Royal London Hospital in Whitechapel. He was there to visit Jimmy Andrews, a Richardson gang member wounded in the brawl. He didn't know his movements were being watched. He didn't know that the Cray twins were already planning their revenge. And he didn't know that just 300 meters away, in the heart of East End territory, the Blind Beggar pub was waiting. The Blind Beggar wasn't just a pub. It was a fortress, a Cray stronghold. And that evening, around 8:30 p.m., Cornell walked in like he owned the place. He sat at the bar, ordered a pint, joked with the locals. Some say he looked around and muttered, "Well, look what the dogs brought in." Whether he said it or not, it didn't matter. Because Ronnie Cray was already inside. Ronnie didn't hesitate. No warning. No dramatic speech. Just silence. Then a single gunshot. Up close. To the head. Cornell dropped like a sack of bricks, blood pooling on the floor. Ronnie and his men turned and walked out, calm, unhurried, as if they just left a Sunday lunch. The murder sent shockwaves through London. Police swarmed the Blind Beggar. Witnesses clammed up, too scared to talk. But the investigation grew. And for the Richardsons, it was a devastating blow. Cornell wasn't just a drug dealer. He was a key player, a fearless enforcer. His death left a hole in their operation. And with the Mr. Smith's brawl already drawing heat, the law was closing in. But the real downfall came from within. In July 1965, a victim, beaten, bruised, forced to mop up his own blood with his underwear, finally spoke to the police. It was the first crack in the Richardson armor. But the fatal blow came from Johnny Bradbury, a gang member convicted of murder in South Africa. Allegedly on Charlie Richardson's orders, Bradbury faced the gallows. So he made a deal. He turned Queen's evidence. He spilled everything. Crimes, locations. And he wasn't alone. Other victims, offered immunity, came forward. Some were smuggled to South Africa, Spain, Majorca, given new identities to protect them. The police, led by Inspector Gerald MacArthur and his special CD squad, moved fast. On July 30th, 1966, the same day England won the World Cup, raids swept across South London. The entire Richardson gang was rounded up. Charlie was arrested for grievous bodily harm, Eddie for fraud. And in April 1967, the torture trial began at the Old Bailey. The courtroom was a horror show. Victims described teeth being pulled with pliers, men nailed to floors, electric shocks. The press called it the trial of the torturers. Charlie Richardson, the mastermind, was sentenced to 25 years. Eddie got an additional 10. The empire was over. But Charlie wasn't done. In 1980, he escaped from an open prison. For nearly a year, he was on the run. And in one of the most bizarre chapters of British crime history, he dressed as Santa Claus, handing out presents to children, trying to win public sympathy. He gave interviews. He drank in pubs with ex-cops. He even fled to Paris. But it ended in Earl's Court, arrested after leaving a sex shop tied to his family. He was finally released in 1984. Eddie's story was darker. In 1990, he was convicted in a £70 million drug heist. Sentenced to 35 years, he served 12. The brothers never reconciled. Eddie accused Charlie of shady deals in prison. The bond was broken. Charlie died in 2012, peritonitis, emphysema from years of smoking. Frankie Fraser died in 2014, his life a testament to violence and survival. And the Cray twins? They didn't escape either. Cornell's murder brought the spotlight crashing down on them. In May 1968, a massive operation led to their arrest. In 1969, they were convicted of multiple murders, including Cornell's, and sentenced to life. The empire was gone. The era of the celebrity gangster was over. But their legacy? That lives on. The White Horse pub in Upton, Norfolk, once a Richardson bolt hole, built with laundered cash, still stands. Its walls lined with photos of the gang, frozen in time. A quiet monument to power that burned too bright, too fast. And the stories? They've become legend. Ronnie Cray's cold-blooded shot in the Blind Beggar. Frankie Fraser's pliers. Charlie Richardson's Santa escape. These aren't just crimes. They're dark folklore of a London that no longer exists, but still haunts the streets. Because the truth is, this wasn't just a gang war. It was a tragedy. A story of men who built empires on blood, only to be destroyed by it. The Richardsons, the Krays, they weren't heroes. They weren't even anti-heroes. They were men who believed power was eternal, that fear could last forever. But it can't. The law caught up. Time moved on. And the underworld changed. The flamboyant, violent gangsters of the 60s were replaced by quieter, colder networks, more organized, harder to catch. The age of the celebrity gangster faded into history. Yet, in the dim light of a Soho pub or the quiet corner of a London archive, the names still echo. Richardson, Cornell, Fraser, men who ruled the night, men who burned the city, and men who proved one unshakable truth: power built on blood will always fall. But its shadow? That lingers. Forever. If you've just uncovered the dark secrets of London's most feared gangland empires, and your pulse still races from the blood-soaked streets of the 1960s underworld, then you belong in the world of forgotten crimes empires. This is where legend meets truth, where power built on bullets, betrayal, and broken bodies is unearthed from the shadows. The Kray twins, the Richardsons, the clubs, the crimes, the cover-ups. No story is too buried, no name too infamous. If you crave more untold tales of rise, rage, and ruin, of empires forged in fire and destroyed by their own cruelty, then hit that subscribe button now. Join a growing legion of true crime explorers who aren't satisfied with headlines. They want the hidden history. Like this video? Smash the like button. Share it with someone who thinks they know crime. And turn on the bell, because the next empire we expose could be the most dangerous one yet. This is Forgotten Crimes Empires, where the past never stays buried.
In the shadows of North London, there's a name that's spoken only in whispers. A name that doesn't appear in schoolbooks or newspapers unless blood is spilled or bodies vanish. The Addams family. No, not the ghoulish sitcom clan snapping fingers in unison, but a real syndicate of ruthless brothers who built a criminal empire so efficient, so feared, that even seasoned gangsters knew to keep their distance. This wasn't fiction. This wasn't cinema. This was Islington. And what they created was arguably the most dangerous and sophisticated crime Syndicate Britain has ever seen. The streets they walked were paved in fear. Their empire was sculpted with intimidation, silence, and surgical violence. And those who crossed them, they didn't get second chances. It all began with Terry Addams, born into a large Irish family in Barnesbury, Islington. The eldest of 11 children, Terry was calculating, calm, and always thinking 10 moves ahead. Alongside him were his two younger brothers, Tommy, with a financial flair and a reckless edge, and Patrick, better known as Patsy, a firecracker of violence and unpredictability. Together, they weren't just another gang, they were a system, a machine, a shadow state operating beneath London's surface. They started with the small stuff: market extortion, protection rackets, a few broken bones, some heavy whispers. But in the underworld, ambition is as addictive as power. The Addams brothers didn't want turf. They wanted domination. By the 1980s, they'd formed the Clerkenwell Crime Syndicate. On the streets, they were simply called the A-Team, a brand that inspired loyalty, dread, and silence. Their network expanded like veins across London. Drugs, stolen goods, gold, firearms, information. Every asset that mattered in the criminal ecosystem flowed through them. And their rules were terrifyingly simple. If you were in, you were protected. If you were out, you were over. One man who walked their world, let's call him Billy, spent a decade inside the machine. He describes a chilling moment inside R.A. Rass, a club owned by the family. A man walks in. One of the brothers glances up, nods, and mutters, "That one. He's got to go. No shouting, no threat, no drama." Later that night, the man is stabbed to death on a quiet detour home. Efficient, unemotional, final. That was the signature of the Addams family. They didn't grandstand. They didn't pose. They executed, literally. And their power? It didn't just come from blood and muscle. It came from brains. Terry ran the syndicate like a Fortune 500 company. Meetings were held at his £2 million mansion in Mill Hill, complete with a chandelier-lit dining room turned boardroom. Operations were streamlined. Drugs came in bulk. Stolen lorries full of cigarettes and booze were redirected and monetized with ruthless precision. Billy once said it best: "We were like a multinational PLC with a body count." And they didn't just control supply, they controlled demand. Other criminal crews would come to the Addams brothers for help moving weight. Why? Because the Addams syndicate had the contacts, the infrastructure, and the untouchable reputation to make things disappear and reappear, often as stacks of laundered cash. But make no mistake, beneath the business suits and smart cars was a core of violence that would make most street thugs shrink. When financier David McKenzie crossed the family, he didn't just get a warning. He got a bloodbath. Inside the home of Terry's brother-in-law, enforcer Christopher McCormick took McKenzie apart. Slashes. Blunt trauma. By the time Billy walked in, McKenzie's ear and nose were hanging off. There was blood on the walls, on McCormick's jacket, on the floor. And yet, somehow, in a court of law, McCormick walked free. Evidence meant nothing. Fear bent logic. Witnesses forgot. Juries hesitated. Even justice seemed to flinch at the Addams name. In 2007, Terry Addams was sentenced to 7 years for laundering £1 million, a fraction of his estimated £100 million fortune, but enough to finally break the illusion of total immunity. Tommy Addams followed in 2017, sentenced to 7 years for money laundering. A year before that, Patsy Addams got 9 years for a shooting. One by one, the kings of the Clerkenwell syndicate were toppled. But the end wasn't clean. Terry's guilty plea came with a condition: drop the charges against his wife, Ruth. Even as the empire crumbled, the family bond held tight. Blood, after all, ran thicker than concrete. Today, the once feared Terry Addams claims he's broke. He lives in a modest council flat in Bloomsbury and insists he's unemployed. Yet in 2017, he paid over £720,000 to avoid prison. In 2019, he settled a £50,000 court bill in hours. Authorities believe the real money never left. It simply moved further into the shadows. Tommy Addams keeps a lower profile. No interviews, no appearances. But law enforcement hasn't stopped watching. They know that Tommy, once dubbed the financial brain of the operation, is too smart to retire without a safety net. The A-Team may no longer rule the streets of London, but their name still carries weight. The air still tightens when it's mentioned in the wrong pub. The legacy lingers, an echo of a time when three brothers turned Islington into their personal kingdom and ran an underworld empire that would rival the Sicilian Cosa Nostra. Billy, the former insider, looks back with mixed emotions. "It was the best time of my life," he admits. "We were feared, but we were respected. If you stuck with them, they looked after you. Everyone got their share. There was loyalty. If you cut one, the others would bleed." But he also remembers the cost. The paranoia, the violence, the constant weight of knowing one misstep could make you vanish. "I don't miss looking over my shoulder," he says now. "I had my fill of money and mayhem. But peace? Peace is priceless." So, what happens when power fades? When the knives are sheathed and the voices go quiet? Maybe the Addams brothers are retired. Maybe they're not. But one thing is certain: London has never forgotten them. And neither has the underworld. The Addams family were never just criminals. They were architects of fear, engineers of silence, and legends in a city that has seen more than its share of ghosts. If you found this story fascinating, if you want more hidden truths, more legends of power and blood in the shadows, then subscribe to Inside the Secret World of Mafia Titans. Because the underworld never sleeps. And we're just getting started.